The first month after arriving in Canada, I got lost 3 times, slept through my bus stop, accidentally walked to a nude beach, and I had to pretend to be Christian just so someone could help my family. Okay, let me explain from the beginning. When I first came to Canada, I had to take a flight that was more than 15 hours long. I had never spent that much time sitting in one place before, and that was the nightmare. That was the worst experience ever on air for me. And by the time the plane landed, I could barely feel my legs. I stood up and thought, okay, I have arrived in a new country and I may have permanently lost the lower half of my body. And luckily, after walking around for a while, my legs came back. But my confidence did not, because there was one major problem. I couldn't speak English. And I had learned English in the school, like the middle school, of course. So I learned some vocabulary. I learned like apple, banana, orange, 1, 2, 3, 4. I learned the 26 alphabets. And I learned some grammar. But I have never talked to a native English speaker ever before. I could probably tell you that, Tom goes to school every day, or there's a pen on the desk. My home is where I'm from. Nice to meet you. Blah, 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 blah. Very useful, But when a real person suddenly spoke English to me, especially they look different from the people I grew up with, my brain will immediately shut down. They could say something extremely simple like, "Hey, do you need a bag?" And inside my head, I would be thinking, "A bag? What does bag mean?" Oh, bag. Oh, that bag. And why are you asking me about a bag? Is this a Oh no, I had never experienced this during exams. No, that was not taught from school. What answer does this person want? Then, probably 5 seconds later, I would finally understand the question. But by that point, the conversation was already dead. So during my first month in Canada, almost everything felt confusing. Like the roads were confusing, the buses were confusing, the name of the places were confusing. Even the name of universities were confusing. Like in my home country, a university usually have a really long name, like a full name, or tell you exactly what it is. But in North America, people love turning everything into 3 letters, like UOC, U of A, and what else? The U of H, UOY, or a UBC, or blah 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 blah, UOW. Like to a Canadian, this name probably sounds completely normal, but to me, they sounds like secret government organizations. I had no idea what any of them meant. And during that first month, my parents and I got lost several times. We got lost downtown, we got lost around the university. Like, we got lost everywhere, no matter what the cost may be. Sometimes we were all together, which was strangely comforting. And at least if 3 people are lost together, it feels like less being lost and more like going on a family trip with no destination. One of the most memorable times happened after my English class. At the time, I lived near the University of the city, but my English class was downtown, so every day I had to take the bus between downtown and the area where I lived. And that day, I was like really exhausted, or maybe I was still dealing with jet lag. Maybe learning English for several hours had to use every functioning cell in my brain. I got on the bus, I found a seat, and leaning my head against a window, and then somehow fell asleep. And I slept extremely well, really, really well. And when I finally woke up, the bus was almost empty. It was at the last stop. I looked outside, nothing looks familiar. And I had no idea where I was. Apparently, I had slept through my stops, stayed on the bus, and traveled all the way to the terminus. The final station was inside the university campus. At the time, I did not know this campus at all. I did not even know the university's operation. I just knew that I was standing in the middle of a giant collection of buildings surrounded by signs containing words I could not understand and people walking around. A lot of young people. I didn't know what's going on. And the place I got off a bus was a junction of the roads, and there was a huge sign, like a sculpture, says UOC. And I didn't know what that sign meant, but later on, that turns out to be the university's abbreviation. But hey, those are just three random alphabets to me at the point. And so I did what any frightened teenager with limited English would do. I looked for someone who appeared to speak Chinese. Eventually, I saw like two guys walking who looked like Eastern Asian, and I stopped them and asked one of them where I was, and he told me, "You're at UFC." And I said, "What is UFC?" He looked at me. I looked at him. There was a brief silence. I think he was trying to decide whether I was joking or not. Imagine standing inside one of the largest university in North America and asking someone what that university is. He gave me a small smile. It was the kind of smile you would give when you do not fully understand what is happening and you like to leave immediately. Then he walked away. You probably think I was crazy or something. And I was still lost. The funniest part is that the years later, I became a student at the exact university. Today, I walk around the campus almost every day. I know the buildings and the bus stop. I know where to buy food. I know which paths are the shortcuts. But during my first month in Canada, somebody could tell me, "You're at UFC." And my honest response was like, "What is that?" At least I had a phone. Unfortunately, I did not have a Canadian SIM card. So the phone was basically a small glass rectangle that could tell me the time. And probably my, and you can scroll TikTok on it. I could not call anyone. I had no mobile data. I could only contact my parents when I found public Wi-Fi. And near the university, there was a Shoppers Drug Mart. And at the time, I did not know what Shoppers Drug Mart was even. Was it a pharmacy or a supermarket or what is that? It just looked like a small store or whatever. Why did it sell medicine, chips, shampoo, milks, and lottery tickets in the same building? I had no idea. And I knew that it had free Wi-Fi, so I connected to it. At the moment, Shoppers became my embassy. Its public Wi-Fi was my only connection to the civilization. I sent a message to my mother and told her that I had no idea where I was. My mother then contacted someone from a Chinese church. Oh, well, it's not really a church like specifically for Chinese person, but most of the members in the church are, ethnically Chinese. And, so that church she had been attending, and this part of the story is a little bit complicated. My family did not believe in Christianity. We were actually atheists. However, when we first arrived in Canada, we knew almost nobody. We had to use an agency to help us settle down, and the guardian arranged through the agency was not very responsible. Like, he was not really patient because we were asking everything, basically, and we couldn't speak English. Like, my parents didn't speak English. They were still not able to speak English really well, even nowadays. And whenever we actually needed help, it was really difficult to reach them. The Chinese church was one of the only communities where people were willing to talk to us, introduce us to others, and sometimes help us with practical problems. When you move to a new country and cannot speak the language, even a simple task can become enormous. Opening a bank account is difficult. Finding the correct bus is difficult. Understanding a letter, that's a huge challenge. You constantly need someone who can explain what is happening. For us, the church became one of the few places where we could find a kind of support. At the same time, we felt that we had to present ourselves as interested in Christianity. Um, we attended church activities, we listened, we acted open to the possibility of baptism. I do not say this to disrespect Christians or the people who help us. Several of them were genuinely really kind. Um, I'm still grateful that somebody was willing to help my family when we were confused and alone. It was simply a strange situation. We needed community, and this was the only community we had. So after receiving my message through the sacred Wi-Fi of Shoppers Drug Market, my mother contacted a church member. She agreed to drive me over and find me. There was still one problem. I needed to tell her where I was, and I still did not know where I was. Fortunately, the university campus had maps. Unfortunately, I was the person reading those maps. I looked at one of the signs and tried to figure out my position. I saw the little symbol and said, "You're here," and that should have solved everything. Instead, it gave me several new ways to become lost. I picked a direction and started walking. The campus was huge. Every time I reached another map, I looked at it, become even more confused, and continued walking without completely unjustified confidence. I thought I was moving towards a place where the church member could find me. I was actually walking towards the ocean. Eventually, the buildings began to disappear. I saw trees, I saw the path going downhill, and then I could see the water. At the point, I thought, okay, this is definitely not the bus station. But the view was beautiful, so I kept walking. And that is how I accidentally arrived at the beach. It was sometimes around the beginning of the autumn. I was wearing long sleeves and long pants. The weather was still comfortable, but it was definitely not the kind of weather where I would think today is a perfect day to remove every piece of clothing I own. Apparently, other people had reached a different conclusion. I walk onto the beach, then I look around, and everybody was naked, completely naked. Like young people were naked, old people were naked. There were young women, elder men, middle-aged guys with large stomach and very little hair. Nobody seems embarrassed. Nobody was like trying to hide. They were walking around, talking and lying on the sand and enjoying the evening like this was the most ordinary thing in the world. Meanwhile, I was standing there in a long sleeve and long pants carrying all the cultural shocks available in the Western Hemisphere. I had never seen anything like that. Growing up in East Asia, and nudity was extremely private. Even talking about it could feel embarrassing. And now I had accidentally walked onto a beach where everyone was collectively decided the clothing was optional. The strangest part was how normal everyone acted. Nobody was staring at everyone. Nobody seemed uncomfortable. And nobody gives a shit. I was probably the most suspicious person there because I was fully dressed and staring at everybody with the expression of someone who had just discovered a new species. I remember looking towards the ocean. The sun was beginning to go down. The light reflected across the surface of water, and everything looked golden. The waves were shining. There were seagulls in the distance, standing around in the grass and doing whatever seagulls do in the evening. Maybe they were building nests. Maybe they were also judging me. It was genuinely one of the most beautiful sunsets I had ever seen. And in front of that beautiful sunset, there were dozens of completely naked strangers walking peacefully along the beach. It was beautiful, it was confusing, and it was unforgettable. I think that was the moment when I finally understood that I had moved to a completely different country. Canada had already given me many clues. The languages was different, the city was different, the buses were different. The university had been compressed into 3 mysterious letters. But the Nude beach made me the message very clear. I was far away from home. Eventually, the church member found me and drove me back. I do not remember how exactly we managed to locate each other. Maybe I sent her a description or whatever. Maybe Shaw of Drugs Market performed the second miracle. I only remember that I finally made it home. Looking back, the whole experience felt almost impossible. I arrived in Canada, unable to speak much English. I fell asleep on the bus and woke up at a university I did not recognize. I used Wi-Fi of the store I had never heard of. Then I followed the campus map in the wrong direction and discovered a nude beach. Years later, that university became my university. The shoppers became the shoppers I visited most often. The roads are the ones felt impossible to understand became ordinary. Places that used to be frightened me slowly became part of my daily life. I think this is one of the strangest things about moving to another country. At first, everything feels hostile and confusing. Then slowly, the unknown becomes familiar. One day, you suddenly realize you're giving directions to somebody else. You are explaining the bus system. You know what the university abbreviation means. You walk past the same shoppers without even thinking about it. But sometimes you walk through the campus where you once got completely lost. Whenever I think about my first month in Canada, I remember how small and helpless I felt. I also remember that evening on the beach, the sunlight on the ocean, the seagulls in the grass, and the beautiful view, and unfortunately, the large number of naked old men. That image may stay with me forever. So that was my first month in Canada. A long flight, terrible English, several volunteers, one extremely useful public Wi-Fi network, and much more nudity than I had expected. Welcome to the country, I guess.